Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the workshop. I've let everyone in now, so over to you, Yamakani.
And indeed welcome everyone for joining this session. So quickly, I will take you through the agenda, and firstly, we will hear some remarks from the chair of the LDC group, Madam Medellin from Senegal, and I think she has now joined. And after that, we also invite you to introduce yourself and read a light through the chat. Introduce yourself, the country, and your role in the GHG inventories, and indeed your email as well as phone number. And then we will then go straight into a presentation from the IPCC. Thank you so much, Sandro from IPCC, for joining this session to provide us with a presentation on methodological approach. Then after that presentation, we're going to Q&A session, trying to provide feedback to Sandro. Then we'll have an experience sharing from Colombia. We have our colleagues from Colombia to share with us an experience in developing national emission factors. And then we are supposed to have another experience sharing from South Africa, but unfortunately they couldn't manage to join. However, we have also fellow LDCs who are here who also share the experience in trying to move to higher tire methods. After that, we'll have a Q&A session to the two presentations for the experience sharing. Then we'll have a way forward and closing remarks. So now allow me to invite the chair of the LDC group, Madam Medellin. You have the floor to open us some remarks.
Good morning. Hi, Yamikani. I just want to thank you as coordinator of this thematic on transparency, and also on this workshop on transparency and particularly on the inventory, how to improve for LDCs countries. I thank also the partner from the IPCC experts who have also joined us for this training. I think it's really important for us as LDCs to participate and contribute to the international effort of reducing greenhouse gases. And first, to do that, you have to have a better inventory. To do that, you need really to improve the quality of your inventory. It is important because this will allow you also to more high quality of project. We know that if you want to be in the market, this necessity of having a good inventory is important. So I just want to thank you, your transparency team, and EID and all partners for organizing such a transparency workshop training. It is the second. I think last year it was something you have conducted, and today is the second one, and trying to help us to work on chair 2. I know it's not easy because even in our case in Senegal, we're feeling many challenges, and I guess it's the same in all LDCs countries. So I will not take it long. I think this is something we want to repeat more and more because it's important just to build the capacity. And also, as you mentioned, sharing experiences with the country who are more experienced than LDCs countries, to learn from them, and even to learn from LDCs who are available to share their case. thank you, and I wish you all a successful training workshop. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair, for sparing this time to speak to us. We understand how tight schedules you are going through, and it really shows your leadership in supporting us, the LDCs, to move ahead, especially on this very important topic of transparency. As you know, this is the backbone of the Paris Agreement, and as you have rightly put it, for us to measure our action and ambitions, we really need to have accurate and indeed systems to produce good quality greenhouse gas inventories. So without watching much of the time, we want to make this so interactive and indeed to really listen more from the presenter from the IPCC, as well as our colleagues from Colombia and other LDCs to share experience in this very important topic. So we now go straight into the first presentation of the day. I now invite Sandro from the IPCC. Indeed, to just mention, Sandro is the head of the technical support unit of the IPCC's task force on national greenhouse gas inventories, in charge of developing the methodology and software for calculation and reporting of the national GHG inventories. So from this background, you can see how important to have him in this session. So Sandro, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Do you hear me well?
Yeah,
yes.
We can hear you, Sandro.
Okay. Okay, so let me go in presentation modality, if it works. Yeah. So my presentation is quite, I guess, is quite simple. It's a standard presentation. You see, I don't even put the reference to the specific meeting, because this is what is in the IPCC guidelines. This is for everybody, developed and developing country. And this explain why we have a tiered approach in the IPCC guidelines and how it works. I have a question to the organizer. I know that usually the question and answer goes at the end. However, my preferred way to go is always to take questions when they arise, even during the presentation. So where this is possible, I will be very happy to stop, answer, and then to proceed. Because very often, I mean, when you lose the opportunity, then at the end of the presentation, people maybe forgot, maybe is too shy to ask, and then the opportunity is lost to explain better. So this is the outline. You see, the outline starts with the national circumstances. And indeed, it's because of national circumstances that in the IPCC we have a tiered approach instead of a standard. You will see during the presentation that we don't go for standard. The IPCC guidelines are not a standard. They are guidance, they are good practice. They are guidance to apply good practice. You never find the word standard, because a standard is let's say, is a level set equal for everybody. But we know very well that the national circumstances are very different country by country. So a standard may fail for some countries because it's too ambitious, is to request too much resources or capacities, while for other countries it's too banal. It's not enough because they may do better. And also because this is in terms of capacity, but then also in terms of emissions removal. In some countries, a source is very important. In some other countries, that source is not significant. So for some countries, a very important source, a very large source, need to be targeted with more data collection, with higher methods, in order to be more accurate in the estimate of such large source. For others, the source is not so important, so you may just go with the easiest method. So national circumstances is the reason why we have a tiered approach, not a standard equal to everybody, but a tiered approach that requires everybody to do our best best. We will explain this here. But also to progress, because the tiered approach, again, is not like a standard. You arrive, you reach the standard, and that's it. Tiered approach requires you to improve, continuously improve your inventory, year by year, cycle by cycle. This is good because you will, for two reasons. First, because doing the inventory is a learning by doing activity. You learn a lot when you apply the IPCC guidelines. To read the IPCC guidelines is just the starting point, but to understand what they say sometimes just because you have the experience on applying, and then you well understand what was the guidance. And not only because you increase your skill, your country increase your capacity. So that's why a tiered approach is fundamental to guide the country and yourself towards higher tiers estimates. So improving continuously your inventory. This is also good for your position, because this means that your activity in the ministry, in the agency, will be required for a long time, because it's not that you do an inventory, then you leave. You do the inventory and then you immediately start planning the improvement of the inventory that you did, designing the new inventory and preparing the new inventory. It's a continuous activity. So national circumstances. Which are the national circumstances? I said briefly. Data availability and data quality. Not all countries have the same level of data availability, and also the quality of the data changes dramatically country by country. The expertise in the inventory agency and technical capability. Not all countries have the same expertise and technical capability, which is also often associated with the resources available, financial resources available. There are countries that have space agencies and countries that don't, that have a problem to buy even the images. So there is a large differences. I will very often you will listen me doing a follow example, because I'm an follow expert, even if now I'm heading the unit that cover all sectors. And then another very important element. These three elements are equally important. They are just in order, let's say, of in a timing, in a inventory developing timeline. You first look at the data, then you see which is the expertise in the unit to use the data, and then at the end you produce the estimate. Then you see the significance of this estimate in terms of level and trend. We will see this is the IPCC provide the key category analysis methodology to deal with these, to identify the most significant sources and things in terms of level of emissions, but also in terms of trend, because as Yamikani said, also Madeleine said at the beginning, the inventory is needed also for mitigation. So for trend, you need to see where the emissions or removals are increasing or decreasing in order to see if your actions are properly implemented or there is something else that needs to be done. So these are the three elements equally important that establish which are your national circumstances. And according to these three elements, you need to see which is the most appropriate tiers that you may apply, and then how to progress, because again, there is always a progress from the starting point toward the future, toward the new inventories. Let me say, since we are, I mean, in many of your countries have starting now to have you are doing the inventory since many years, but in many cases, this inventory is made by a consultant and not by an office in the country. So now all countries are starting to set an office. The default starting point is tier 1. So my suggestion is that when you start, you do first tier 1, even if then you don't use, because then you move immediately to tier 2 and you want to apply tier 2 to your even first inventory. But tier 1 allows you to understand how the methodology works, which are the data needed, and also to understand how much important is the source in terms of emissions removals, or the level of emissions removal and trend. A tier 1 very often is a very good benchmark, because when you go to higher tiers, then you need also to verify if, especially for tier 3, if you go for a model, so for non an IPCC methodology, for a model that anyhow need to be, you know, consistent with the 5 reporting principles, at the end, the model output need to be verified. Tier 1 can be a good benchmark to compare, to see how far the higher tier emissions are from tier 1, and to look at why there are those differences. This is also very helpful for IPCC, because this activity may identify the needs to improve the IPCC methods or IPCC default. So it's a very good activity also then for us to receive your feedback on this. As I said, we provide guidance instead of a standard, no standard. There is a large variability. A standard that doesn't fit the large variability will cut out, will be too short for some and too demanding for others. So thanks to the guidance, IPCC provides methodological guidance. Yes? Somebody asking? No. So IPCC provides methodological guidance with the aim to allow any country in the world, under any national circumstances, to prepare a complete, a transparent, accurate, complete, consistent, and comparable greenhouse gas inventory. Okay? So, and these guidance are organized in good practice, are designed in good practice. What is a good practice? A good practice is a set of procedures intended to ensure that the greenhouse gas inventories are accurate. And this, I would say, greenhouse gas inventory, but you may read category by category estimates, in the sense that the estimates reported are systematically, and the word systematically here is fundamental. Often people forget this. Now I tell you why it's fundamental. Systematically, neither over nor underestimating the true value, so far as can be judged. Because, you know, the true value is unknown in statistics. An estimate is an approximation of the true value. But you must be unbiased. There must not be bias. Bias is a systematic error. Any estimate is always only by chance, you know, you may estimate the true value. It's very unlikely. It's much common, more common that you do not get the true value. You are either above or below. But so far, this is not due to a bias, but it's just because of random errors. That is acceptable. Because random error, then they average out, you know, when you sum up, you aggregate at the national level the total. The random error tend to average. So the total error is smaller. The total error of an inventory is usually smaller than the errors of the single categories, because there is this quality of random error to average out when propagated across an inventory. So systematically means that must be unbiased. If a bias is identified, that's why it's written there, so far as can be judged, because you may have bias for what you are not aware. A bias that is not identified, of course, is there. But so far as you identify a bias, you must remove it. There is never accepted, I mean, an estimate that is biased is not accurate, so doesn't fulfill the 5 reporting principles that we have seen before. Then the second step is that the uncertainties, the random error, uncertainties refer to random error, are reduced so far as practicable. So random error are accepted. Of course, you need to reduce those as far as practicable, because this is very much connected with the natural circumstances, which means the data availability, data quality, technical capability. So if you don't have the instruments, or to reach those instruments require you a disproportionate amount of resources, you stop, you don't go further. You may monitor for fires, again, is still a for example, for forest fire with the satellite in real time, and measure real time the extension on fire, and then to derive from this, because of a deep mapping of a biomass, very precise estimate of biomass burning emissions, but these require you a huge amount of resources. Some countries may be required to do so because they have the resources, but for other countries, this is out of the practicable, out of the practicability. So you don't require to do that. Then for those less certain estimate, so estimate that have the likelihood to be more affected by random errors are acceptable. Okay. So the practicability is a very important concept connected with the national circumstances. Systematically is a paramount principle, I mean, is accuracy. If an estimate is biased, it must be corrected. The bias must be always removed. IPCC methods are generally, what is an IPCC method? IPCC method, this is a general definition. IPCC methods are generally based on bottom-up calculation. So we go from the activity data, and possibly at the level of category or subcategory, or subdivision even, is even better. So a bottom-up calculation of the estimate through the quantification of processes and activity that cause anthropogenic emission removals. At the level of each source sink category, or I said even lower, as much you disaggregate the category in subcategory, subdivision, as more accurate, more precise is the estimate that you produce, because as I said, when you aggregate, random errors tend to average out. So the sum, a category estimate that is a sum of subdivision estimate is more precise than a category estimate that is not. It's just estimated at once with activity data for the entire category without any stratification. Of course, stratification has a meaning if you have then emission removal factors to apply to the various subcategory subdivision. If you only have one emission factor, then the estimate is done at the level of the category. Okay. So the categorization of IPCC categories, I guess in the next slide you see IPCC for each, so the IPCC guidelines are made of 5 books. The first is general guidance, the other are sectoral guidance. In the first chapter of each of those, there is a categorization tree, where you have all the categories of the specific sectors. And this categorization is designed to cover all anthropogenic emissions removals only. This is very relevant for the aforementioned sector, where you have also other sources of emissions that are also other things that are not included in the guidelines. And so to include all of them, but also to avoid any double counting. So the categorization is made in a way that categories don't overlap. The definition of the categories is made in a way that there is never overlapping, because if a category overlaps, then you may report the same activity data in 2 categories, and then you have a double count. Okay. The tiered approach. So again, to deal with this large variability in national circumstances, the IPCC guidelines provide good practice organized within a tiered approach. And we have 3 methodological tier levels. The tier 1, which is the IPCC default method. Tier 2. Tier 2 is an intermediate method. Usually very often is tier 1 method, but with the country-specific emission factors. But you see that for some of the categories in some sectors, IPU, energy, also in waste, in a follow, I guess, just livestock, but also livestock, I guess also some N2 emission from soil. Anyhow, IPCC provide also an more defined, let's say, more refined equation methodology that is just designed for tier 2. Tier 3, which is the most demanding method in theory, again, this is a general, these are general definition. Tier 1 is IPCC default method, and there is no exception. Tier 2, as I said, can be either the tier 1 method, but with a country-specific emission factor, or an alternative IPCC equation with always country-specific emission factors. Tier 3 is usually an IPCC, a country-specific methodology, but you will see that for some very limited categories, this is limited, I guess, to IPU, I guess, energy in one case. IPCC has a tier 3 methods. Usually this method is more demanding in terms of activity data, because I mean the methods going upper in terms of tiers requires you to disaggregate your category in more subcategories, subdivisions. So you disaggregate the population. Disaggregating the population requires you more data, because you need to have the data to disaggregate the population first, and also to have more emission factor, because different subdivision of the population need to be assigned, need to have assigned different emission factors. This is very simplistic description. So that's why tier methods are generally considered to be more accurate and precise than the lower. Again, this is true so far as a tier 3 method, a country-specific methodology, is verified. This is a UNFCCC requirement also, reported requirement. It is a fundamental requirement, because a model builds a virtual representation of the real world. And then you keep evolving across time this virtual representation and generating outputs in terms of emissions and removals. You need always to check how close this virtual representation is to the real world. And because any virtual representation of the real world is a simplification, also in a very fast changing world, such as simplified representation of the world may then may lose very soon accuracy, because they are not anymore catching the real world. Tier 1, for tier 1, IPCC provide the method always, provide the default values for emission factor and ancillary parameters, always. So to prepare, and that's why I say tier 1 is the starting point, because to prepare an tier 1 emissions, the only information required is, of course, the activity data. The activity data shall be collected by the inventory compiler. Very often, activity data are needed, are also collected by some global data set. So if the country has problem to find in its economic statistic, which is unlikely, because again, this has been designed to be those that are usually collected by all economies. So also the availability of global data set may be. Robert? Okay. Allora, tier 1 is designed to be unbiased, so it is unbiased. However, emission factor for tier 1 are provided are produced at usually regional or global level, not just for a country. So the application of a country may be not so accurate. It's like the example is, that I may do is like You have the in Italy, this is very used, it's very widely used example in statistics. Where in the past, because in the past we have the military service was mandatory, so every young male at 18 was sent to the medical visit where they take your weight and height. And so Italy had a big database of weight and height of Italian males at 18. And so you may build a strong statistic, you know. But if you apply this national statistic, maybe for a region of Italy, it may be short because in the region, maybe the statistic, the population is not identical to the national average, but maybe they may be a little bit shorter or higher. Usually Northeast Italy was higher than the other region, and maybe fatter than the average, or lighter than the average. So when you apply a statistic that is built on a population that is larger to the population that you apply, so an IPCC default to a national cases, it may not be perfectly accurate, but this is at the global level, it is. So if all countries apply their one, the total is for sure accurate. And this is enough. Tier 2, I said already, can be, I'm not going to repeat because otherwise I consume too much time. I guess I'm already far away. Anyhow, as I said, there can be two options, IPCC default plus country-specific values, or a dedicated IPCC methodology. The same for Tier 3. Tier 3 usually is a user-specific method model designed to fit the national circumstances with higher spatial and temporal disaggregations in disaggregation of categories. But in few cases, you have an alternative IPCC method. I said in the energy, there is road transport, they may have a Tier 3 method. Selecting the appropriate tier. So we have this tiered approach, but you say which one I need to apply. Again, this is the selection is applied in each, for each category. IPCC provides you a decision tree that guide you choose of the appropriate tier to be applied category by category. And this requires two information: the significance of the category, the national circumstances, the data availability. I told you that there is a third quality, that is the national, the technical capacity. Is not here spelled out, but you will see that is in there. It is in the, is not in the decision tree, but is in the overall guidance provided in the, sorry, I should have said that the guidance to the selection of the correct tier are done in chapter 5 of volume 1, the general guidance. But anyhow, we are going to see. This is sorry, chapter 4. Chapter 5 is the uncertainties. You see, this is figure 4.1. So it's volume 1, chapter 4. This is a generic decision tree that, according with your data availability and national circumstances, guide you in the selection of the category. Look here, for instance. Allora, is the sourcing category a key category? Yes. So you don't use, if it's not a key category, I will show you now a key category, you go to apply IPCC default methodology. Choose a method that means use an IPCC default. If it's a key category, then you go to the second. Then the second says, do you have the data to apply a key category? Yes, then you apply a key category, then you apply the guidance, no? No. So it is a key category, but I don't have the data needed to apply a key category. So the next step, you need to evaluate if you may collect easily this data. And so, can data be collected without significantly jeopardizing the resources for for other key categories. This is again the natural circumstance. So do you have the financial and technical capacity to do so? Yes, okay. Do the arrangement, collect the data, and apply a higher tier. No. Apply tier 1 for the moment, but of course you need to work to in the future to progress toward higher tiers. This is the general. You have everywhere. This is an example for road transport, for energy sector. And this is the decision tree. I guess I may skip it because at the end it doesn't say anything new, just to show you one example. As I said, there are key categories are those that have a significant influence on a country's total inventory GHG net emission in terms of absolute level, so in the total level of national emissions, or in the trends, or in the uncertainty. You have two approaches to calculate, to identify key categories. One is without considering the uncertainties, which is approach 1, and the other is including the uncertainty. So a source, even a small source with a large uncertainty is key category at approach 2. At approach 1, usually is not because it's small. It is a good practice to apply higher tiers for key category. I mean, if you have a key category, you should not use the IPCC emission factor, the default IPCC emission factor. You must go for a country-specific emission factor, which means you must collect the data, you do your data analysis, calculate the emission factor, and so on, which is what is going to be presented. In any case, key categories, even if then especially if you don't have the data readily available, key categories should be the priority for countries. Because you do an inventory, once you conclude the first inventory, you need to identify, you need to do an improvement plan. And in this improvement plan, then you need to identify, or you need to prioritize your needs. And key categories need to be prioritized there in terms of data collection, quality assurance, quality reporting, quality control, reporting, and so on. Okay. Key category analysis is just a simple mathematical calculation of is a weighting of the emissions of the single category over the total emission of the countries. This is the level assessment, or of the trend in the emission of the single category over the overall trend of the inventory. So you calculate the trend in the category and you weight according with the total trend in the inventory, and the same for the level. You just look at the level. Then you listen the categories according to their contribution, and those first that sum up to 95% of the total net emission, or 95% contribution to total trend, those are key categories. The approach to calculate in this weighting, there is not just the total emissions, but there is also the uncertainty. I didn't show you I'm not going to show you the equations, they are on the IPCC guidelines. Here, just to show you, you see, the level assessment, you see, this is a key category, an example key category analysis. These are the category listed according with their relevance. Okay, you start from the highest, 0, 3, 2, 2. So this in practice means that forest land and maniforest land, the weight is 32% of the entire inventory. 32% of the total net emissions removals, in this case are removals, came from the forest land and maniforest land. Then the second, which is energy industry. Then you have road transportation and so on. And then you go to you sum up all those. When you're summing up, all right, here I just stopped it because otherwise you could not see, to 0.55, which means 55%, 56%. When you arrive to 95%, you stop. And those are the key categories. because the next is for the trend, the same. You see the contribution to the trend. In this case, again, forest land is the largest contributor in terms of trend. You will see that very often there is not much difference between the two analyses, but sometimes you have some categories that maybe they have not a big contribution in terms of a level, but they are changing significantly. Especially if they're increasing, then they're of interest of the inventory, because they need to be targeted by the policies, no, in order to stop such a rapid growth. Okay. Oh. So again, the tiered approach means that tier 1 is the likely starting point, especially when you start. I mean, in my view, is a must starting point. Tier 1 estimate remain a comparison term when you apply higher tiers. Even when you have just applied tier 2, it's important to see your national emission factor, how far is from the IPCC default. Is within the uncertainty, so the range of the IPCC default. You know, the IPCC default is provided usually with a standard deviation or with a confidence interval, depending. Is your country specific within then the confidence interval of the IPCC default? Is within, you may have this build big trust in the fact that your factor is okay, but it may be out of this confidence interval, which doesn't mean that your country specific factor is not good enough. It may be this is a signal that the IPCC default need to be improved, but it's important then to study the reason why the two factors are so different, and it's very helpful for us to receive this feedback in case you find the reason in the IPCC default. Okay, when a tier 1 is applied to a key category because you don't have the data and you don't have the resources to go there, such category should then be prioritized in the improvement plan. So tier 1 is still acceptable, even if it's a good practice to apply tier 2 for a key category. But if the application of tier 2 requires you an effort that is not practicable, you see the practicability, then you apply tier 1, but then please prioritize the work on this category in your improvement plan, because you need to start to find the resources to build the capacity to arrive to apply in the future a tier 2. Moving to higher tiers usually, generally promotes the accuracy and the precision of the estimate. So increase the accuracy, reduces the uncertainty of estimate. So it's a good practice to do so. And this is the end. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sandro, for the wonderful presentation, and it's indeed eye-opening and educative. Really, as you have explained, most of us, the LDCs, so far we submitted our national communications, the BURs, and in these reports, we are able to present inventories. And really, as you have said, we only used the tier 1 methods using the default methodologies, as you have explained. And with the ETF now coming in, LDCs want to take leadership as well, trying to enhance the implementation of the health transparency framework by following the TAG principles, which you have earlier alluded to. And as such, we want to work towards the moving to tier 2 or higher tiers. You have mentioned that this really improves the accuracy and precision of the inventories. And to say we'll be aiming for higher 3 is to be over ambitious, but now we want to go in the middle ground to the intermediate tier. So now, without wasting much of time, we can
maybe
now go to the
one,
questions. Yes.
Yeah, of course, the ambition should be go to tier 3. My strong suggestion is not moving from tier 1 to tier 3. Don't jump. Do tier 1, tier 2. So it's a step-by-step approach. It's worth to do all the steps. Because doing tier 2 help you, again, first to collect much more data in your country that anyhow will be needed also for tier 3. And so better understanding what is the actual situation in the country. Not only, but then help you also to increase your technical capacity, to improve your estimate, also to have then, because when I go with tier 3, it's very good to have tier 2 as a comparison. I always said, no, tier 3 often requires a verification. A comparison with tier 2 is a very good verification that can be done.
Yeah, thank you. Now I'll take some questions posted by members who are participants of this workshop. Yeah, the first one is asking that, can you kindly cite some examples of biases that could be encountered? I remember you talked about biases.
I see, bias. Bias is the most common. I mean, your life is catching bias. A very simple example, when you very often the inventory is based on statistical data. You don't have a census. You have some data collected at some point from this you derive an average. Now, one of the main problems is how much representative of the entire population is the data that I have available. It is, I'm sampling the entire variability of the population properly, and then the average is actually the average of the population, or this is just a partial sampling of my population. If it's a partial sampling, then there is a bias. How do you remove this bias? First, of course, you need to collect more data. Very often, you may see that the median, sometimes the median value is less affected by the average. So if you have not a normal distribution in the data that you collect, either there is a physical explanation why this distribution is not normal, and you will see also in some cases the distribution are not normal, so you have a skew with the distribution. But if it's not the case, your distribution of the data, you expect a normal distribution, and you have data that are not normally distributed, in these cases the average may be likely biased, and then in this case the median can be a more neutral, let's say, estimator than the average. But this is an example. Maybe I went too in depth. Bias usually are data that I said the data used that don't properly represent the variability of the population. This is the most common bias at tier 1 and at tier 2. And when you go at tier 3 and you do model, the most common bias is that the model doesn't properly represent the real variability, I mean, the real world, because a model is a simplification, and when you simplify, you may lose important pieces. And that is a big source of bias. But also not reporting, I mean, an incomplete, a non-estimate is the largest bias that you may have, because if you know that there are emissions from a category and you don't report the emissions, this is for sure is a bias, because it's like you report 0, but 0 is not, because you know that there are emissions. So in any case, it's better a simple tier 1 estimates than nothing.
Yeah, thank you so much for the explanation. We have a couple of questions, but I think we can go to the next presentation, then come back.
Sorry, there is see, very short. I see the other question is about to move tier 1, tier 2, which category. The key category analysis, you need to move to tier 2 for the key categories first. Then if you want also for the other, but you need to prioritize moving to a higher tier, the key categories, okay?
Yeah, thank you so much, Sandro, for responding to the questions. And
thank you for inviting.
Very helpful. I now invite Hector Moreno from Colombia to share the experience of Colombia in developing country-specific emission factors. As you have said, Sandro, for one to move into the tier 2, you need activity data and country-specific emission factors. So our colleagues from Colombia have experienced developing emission factors, and we want them to share the experience with us from the LDCs who are here. So Hector Moreno, you have the floor. And just a brief background of Hector: works in the Institute of Hydrology, Meteorology and Environmental Studies from the Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development of Colombia.
Thank you. Thank you, Yamikani. Good morning. I am really glad to be here. Thanks for the invitation. For a start, I wanted to show how our understanding of emission factor has evolved through the years. In the first VR, our country delivered to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. We only use 6 emission factors for the IPCC categories that involve cattle. In the second VR, we did a countrywide zoning and calculated 67 emission factors for cattle with a tier 2 methodology using IPCC 2006 guidelines. For the third VR, we apply the model I'll present today. This model was developed by our team and is based on what IPCC proposed with some improvements. And we are already preparing for the first BTR. Sorry. The current methodology starts with the livestock zoning of Colombia. We divided the country in 10 regions according to different variables, such as weather and soils. Within each of these regions, we characterize animals categories and the feed of these animals. Describing animal feed was possible thanks to a database called Alimentro that contained about 11,000 georeference grouse samples. This information is entered into the model, which is made up of equations from the IPCC, NRC, CSIRO, and CNCPS. The main result of the model is the emission factors that together with the activity data allow us to calculate the total emissions. The model also generates other results such as evaluation of the animal, feed, and environment relationship, dry matter intake, and the conversion factor YM. Here I am presenting a diagram of the model that we developed in Colombia. We call it a Follow 1 Colombia. This model takes information of the characteristics of the animals, production system, environmental temperature, and feed, and calculates the emission factors and the conversion factor YM. Additionally, it allows to evaluate the coherence in the data by analyzing the relationship of the animal, its diet, the environmental temperature, and the production system. Considering this variable is important for Colombia because we have 2 different types of cattle, Bos taurus and Bos indicus, and this model allows us to consider the genetic base of the animals as an important variable for calculation. It's important to mention that the documents we have delivered to the United Nations, both the BUR and the NDC, and our nationally appropriate mitigation action are aligned. Since they are built using the AFOL-1 Colombia models, which it's also used to construction mitigation scenarios. This is the livestock mitigation scenarios, which was built bottom up, using information at municipal scale. This is scenarios contemplates the reduction in enteric methane emission and manure management, as well as an increase in catch of CO2 by livestock agroecosystems. The information we obtain from the model allows us to specialize enteric methane emissions at a municipal scale. This is useful to identify where to prioritize mitigation actions. Knowledge of enteric methane emission could allow stakeholders to develop mitigation strategies based on the needs that each region has, which is why the region's level ranking is one of the most important products derived from our calculations. It's important to develop methodologies to calculate emission factors that reflect the reality of livestock farming to reduce uncertainty in greenhouse gas emissions. In the Colombia case, using tier 2 emission factor is mandatory to gain access to payment program based on emission reduction, such as the Biocarbon Fund project. This project is a part of the Biocarbon Fund Work Bank initiative and sustainable landscapes, which has the goal of improving land management of big landscape, including the improvement of farming practice, moving forward in climate smart agriculture and sustainable management of forests. The Biocarbon Fund is financed by governments from Germany, United States, Norway, and the United Kingdom, and it is being currently developed in the Orinoquia region of Colombia. The project worked locally to strengthen capacity to promote conservation schemes and the adoption of sustainable practice in the AFOL sectors. This would contribute to the scene of the emission reduction programs, and it would boost mechanisms of benefit distribution to promote low carbon development. In terms of Colombia's greenhouse gas inventory, this program has allowed for us to sample nitrous oxide and cow urine and manure, which has helped us advance in tier 3 pilot tests on the regional scale. Likewise, with this project, we are improving AFOL-1 Colombia model to better estimate tier 2 direct and indirect nitrous oxide from a manure management system on the national scale. Our team has collaborate with the Latin American Network on Greenhouse Gas Inventory which is a cooperation initiative for Latin American countries and international donors to build technical capacities and sustainable institutions regarding greenhouse gas inventories. We have shared our knowledge with other participants, such as Uruguay, a country that is going to use our model in its next inventory. This is very important to use because one of our goals into super continuous improvement of inventories in our region. Our improvement plans are to develop emission factors that are dynamic over time, since the ones we currently use are static and do not reflect the technology change that livestock farming has undergone during the time series. Develop a model for calculation direct and indirect nitrous oxide emission for manure management, and the future develop a tree model that will reduce much more the uncertainty of the estimate in livestock. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Hector, for the presentation. The experience shows that it took time for you to really develop and move on to higher tier, and at the end you still had to make it, and we are happy to learn from you. And also the improvement plan, you have also highlighted important key steps you want to take to further improve the inventory process. And that is really very important to us as we are learning by doing. And now, before we go to Q&A, I just have to invite my fellow LDC country to share what they have been doing in improving the inventory by going to higher tier methods. I'll invite Milan from Nepal to share their experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Amikani, for inviting me to talk about some works we are doing here in Nepal to move on to the higher tier methods for the reporting. First of all, I'd like to thank Sandro and Hector both because you have done an excellent presentation, and it gave us a very clear look on how the tier methods will work and how we can improve over time in higher tier method for reporting. So as a developing and least developed country, we have kind of very important to go to the higher tier method, because we need to have very solid background or the baseline information on the emissions, and as Hector mentioned in his last presentation, to participate in the carbon market as well. So if you want to produce some confident and some certain less uncertain data, so you need to have a bit higher tier methods for reporting as well. So and also not for the international reporting only, but to look into the policy effects of our mitigation targets or our climate actions. We need to also have a good data on the emission as well. So if we go from the MRV to the enhanced transparency framework, it needs more transparent information as well as the more detailed information on the emissions as well as its uncertainty. So we also definitely looking into going to the higher tier methods for all countries. We don't always want to be in a tier 1 method forever. So that's what I think. In the case of Nepal, we're just starting our steps towards the higher tier methods. And in developing country, what happens, we have some data somewhere, but we don't know the information as an inventory coordinator or someone. Like that's what we are doing. At the first round of work, we are doing a desk review of the things that if we have any emission factors developed by some academia or some research institutes, we are just collecting those information as a first point of work. So then we are also working with the academic institutions and research institutions for the emission factors to go into the higher tier methods. We have last year completed one research on the enteric fermentation of the cattle in Nepal to just look around what the data speaks in a very country context. So we completed that research, and we are now ready to report on that as well. We're also doing on the agriculture sector, because as Sandro mentioned, we have to look into our key categories as well to progress towards the higher tier method. If your category is not that important, you just make that thing a little bit for a little bit a later stage. So we're just working and concentrating us with the livestock and agriculture sector for now. So we are working with various development partners as well as the academic institutions. So why these? Because as a LDC or developing countries, we don't have enough capacity in our ministries or in our agencies that report to the UNFCCC. So it is very good to onboard those kind of institutions that are related to research and other academic things that will help us a lot. That's why we're very much closely connected to the research institutions as well as the academia. I would like to just talk a little bit about the challenges. As we already talk about the challenges, we have a lot of challenges. We have capacity challenges. We don't have such kind of good technologies to research on sometimes, and finance to those researches. We need to prioritize our resources somewhere else rather than to work on the emission factors or something like that. So there are lots of things, but we can overcome them. We need to ask some development partners or some research organizations. In the case of Nepal, we are just last year we requested one request to the United States Embassy that we need some technical support for moving to the higher tier method. So they send us a scientist to work with us to find the data gaps and to find the pathway or how we can move into the higher tier method. So our fellow countries also can explore those kind of avenues if you like to move on. And the other challenge is we just experienced that we did a livestock fermentation research, and we found some numbers on the emission factors, but it was not significantly different than the tier 1 number. So that might be a challenge. You put a lot of resources and time on that, and if it is not so much different or not so much significant from the tier 1 emission factors, that might be a challenge to explain to the management or to some extent to the resource providers. So that might be the challenge. So I'll stop here. Don't take much time because we are already kind of late. So thank you, Emikani, and thank you, Transparency Group, and thank you, LDC, for organizing this workshop. It's very helpful for the colleagues out here to learn more on the going for the higher tier methods. Thank you. Back to you, Amikan.
Yeah, thank you, Milan, for sharing the experience. It really shows that LDCs were not just idle. We are also making some strides to really enhance our reporting. And for Malawi, we are also on the same track. We received support from the CBIT project, and we are commencing the process of developing a emission factors. And I'm happy to see some experts from Malawi are also here from the academia, and also sector experts who will engage very soon. We issued advertisements, and they have sent us some nice proposals on how they could develop emission factors. And it's good to have the IPCC here, who can also highlight some important key steps on how they can support LDCs who wish to have the technical support in developing those. Now, let's now go to Q&A, and I will invite few market people who can raise their hands, and we provide them with the floor to ask, and some will take from the chat. So the first one to take the chat, to raise the hand, will be given the chance. Anyone? While we are also looking at the chat. All right, so some other questions include to Hector. Would you mind to provide a comparison of your country-specific factors versus the IPCC, I think the default? So that's the first question. Would you mind to provide a comparison of your country-specific factors versus the IPCC default emission factor? And why do you use the IPCC 2019 refinement in livestock? And another one to you, Hector, how long was the process of developing these emission factors, having them approved and having them approved? How long was the process of developing these emission factors and having them approved? And then what is the process of developing Tier 2 emission factors, and how is the UNFCCC involved in the process of developing emission factors? So Hector, can you respond to those three? So the first question is, would you mind to provide a comparison of your country-specific emission factors versus the IPCC default emission factor, and why do you use IPCC 2019 refinement in livestock sector? That's the first question.
Oh, okay. Okay, Jamie Kenny. Sorry, can you repeat the question? Oh, well, in this question, my partner, Maria Camila, she helped me to translate, but I don't speak well English, and she helped me to translate the question, the respuesta. Ok, María Camila, ¿me escuchas?
Directora, acá estoy.
Okay, entonces la primera pregunta dice, ¿le importaría proporcionar una comparación de los factores específicos de su país con el factor de emisión predeterminado del IPCC? ¿Y por qué utiliza refinamiento del IPCC en el sector ganadero? Bueno, entonces, María Camila, los factores que nosotros encontramos son más altos que los factores por defecto del IPCC.
Bueno, the factors that we found in Colombia using this method are higher than the ones we find using IPCC default emission factors. ¿Sigue?
Esto se debe a que las dietas que tenemos en Colombia son de menor calidad que las dietas que utiliza el IPCC de referencia.
This is due to the diets that we have in Colombia have a lower quality than the ones that IPCC uses as a reference. ¿Sí?
Por ejemplo, el IPCC usa un GM de 6.5 y en Colombia hemos usado unos modelos para calcular nuestros propios GMs y tenemos GMs que pueden estar entre 9 y 7.
¿Cuál es el GM de IPCC? 6?
6.5.
Okay. So, for example, IPCC uses a YM of 6.5, and we have found YMs even as higher as 8 or 9. ¿Sigue?
Ok, y la última parte de la pregunta es ¿por qué utiliza el refinamiento del IPCC? Entonces, usamos el refinamiento para tratar de mantener nuestra metodología lo más actualizada posible.
We're using that refinement in order to keep, or we're using like a 2019 refinement in order to keep our methodology as updated as possible. I hope that really answers the question.
La siguiente.
Espérate.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. I hope the one who asked has understood. And yeah, they say thank you, Hector. And another question to Hector was how long was the process of developing these emission factors and having them approved? Because there's a process of developing and then the process of being approved. So how long was the process combined?
Héctor, la segunda pregunta.
Sí, la de cuánto duró el proceso de desarrollo de estos factores de emisión y su aprobación, la de how long was the process of developing this emission factor and having them approved. El proceso duró aproximadamente 2 años.
The process lasted approximately 2 years.
Thank you. And how was the UNCCC involved? That's another question.
The third question.
Sí.
What is the process of developing tier 2 emission factors? How is UNCCC involved? Bueno, el proceso de desarrollo de factores de emisión de nivel 2 en Colombia inicia primero. Debemos saber si contamos con los datos de actividad desagregados.
Okay, so this process starts looking for the data activity for the unaggregated data activity. We need to find that activity that is as disaggregated as possible. ¿Sí?
El paso número 2, regionalizamos la ganadería en el país.
The second step was to do the zoning in the country. We divided the country into regions in order to find categories that we could apply. ¿Sí, Héctor?
Sí, para obtener grupos medianamente homogéneos de características de los animales, las dietas y la temperatura ambiental.
This helped us find sort of homogeneous groups that took into account diet, animal type, and environmental temperature.
Y a partir de esta información aplicamos las ecuaciones que sugiere el IPCC en el capítulo 10 del volumen 4.
And from this information, we applied the information that IPCC suggests on chapter 4.
Pero para el caso específico de Colombia.
But for the specific case of Colombia?
Enriquecimos sí, o agregamos a esas ecuaciones ecuaciones de otros modelos como el NRC, el CNCPS y el CSIRO, buscando incluir el efecto.
Espérate. But in order to have these equations enriched, we applied some other equations such as the NRTC. ¿Cuáles fueron las que dijiste, Héctor?
NRC, CNCPS, and CSIRO.
Listo, sigue.
Are ruminant nutrition models. Buscando incluir el efecto de la genética de las dietas locales y de la temperatura ambiental.
And this helped us add the effect of genetics and local diet into our equation. Y Héctor, también cómo estuvo involucrada la Convención Marco.
No, la Convención Marco pues no se involucra, simplemente nosotros realizamos esto internamente porque las guías del IPCC sugieren que este tipo de mejora se puede hacer y que es autonomía de cada país.
Answer the question, the UNFCCC was not that much involved. They only reviewed the process.
Y estas mejoras son autonomía de cada país.
And these improvements are on the autonomy of every country. Yeah, we hope that replies the question.
Yeah, thank you so much. A brief time, I just have to ask Sandro, maybe instead of the UNCCC, then the question can be, how is the IPCC involved in supporting countries to develop specific emission factors?
Yeah, my office, we are three people for the entire planet. So what we do is to produce the guidance. There is a chapter, data collection, chapter 3, I guess, volume 1. There are some guidance, but more than that, we also have the emission factor database we manage, The emission factor database is a collection of data that can be used by people. Of course, is under the expert judgment of the expert that uses the EFDB, the use of the data. That can be of help, but that is not for to develop an emission factor, is to use emission factor already developed. So we don't do more than this, because again, we are 3 persons dealing with everything. So we have materially no time. Thanks. And sorry.
Yeah, thank you very much for responding to the questions. And the last question for Sandro was that somebody said, thank you for the presentation. My question is, what will happen to countries where capacity has not been built, like South Sudan on the greenhouse gas inventory? And another one was, which one should we use for uncertainty assessment? Is it standard deviation or standard error? So if you can respond that question.
Allora, yeah, the first question is, we have the IPCC inventory software to help. So use the IPCC inventory software. Wait, in November at COP, we will release the new version of the software, which is much better. So my suggestion is that you use the software. We are also preparing some guidebooks for each sector to better apply the software by the users. And the second question, the second question was about
how to calculate
standard deviations. Standard. This is not. I mean, it's easy the answer, but I'm not sure it will be understood. First, this is discussed in the 2019 refinement, volume 1, the chapter on uncertainty. There is this discussion between standard deviation and standard error. Anyhow, the simple answer is, when the emission factor used, the value, the activity emission factor used, represent the entire population, then is the standard error that need to be used to calculate the uncertainty. If I use the average height of the Italian male population of 18 years, I want to use the average because I want to calculate the total height of the male 18 years old in Italy. So I use the average value. I multiply by the population of people 18, and then I have the total. There is the standard error. But if I use the average value to, let's say, to figure out the height of a single person, of the people of one region, so if I use the average to apply the average to estimate something that is in the subset of the population from which the value has been calculated, then is the standard deviation. Because in this case, the variability became a source of uncertainty, not just the standard error. So I hope by the PCC guidelines there is more text, so it's easier to get. In theory, when you apply an PCC default, it's always the standard deviation that need to be used to calculate the uncertainty. Because the PCC default is calculated on a population that is larger than just the national country to which you apply. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandro, for the response to the questions, and really we really appreciate for this. And according to our timing, and we should be closing the session now. And in terms of closing, first of all, I'd like to check if the LDC chair is still around. If I can see that she is not online. Yeah, so on behalf of her, the chair, I really thank you all the participants who have joined us into this session. And this session was aimed at mainly the LDC experts who are working on national inventories in the LDC countries. So that was the target, and really we have delivered this to the target people. This is one of the many sessions as LDC group we have organized so that we build our capacity in terms of enhancing reporting our greenhouse gas inventories. And also I thank the panelists here, Sandro and Hector and Camila, for really having these wonderful presentations and interactions which have been done with the LDC colleagues, as well as Milan, a fellow LDC, who came in also to provide experience from Nepal. So we really appreciate for the time to you panelists. We understand you had a lot of things to do, but you spared some time to share experience and also knowledge to the LDC group which are here. And to fellow LDC experts, we want to build a network of experts from the LDCs who will support the new era of reporting just around the corner, the Enhanced Transparency Framework, which will be commencing by 2024. So your contacts have been taken, and really we want you to be active in the activities which will come in from now and onwards, as this is just the beginning. And we have also put into the chat a survey which we request you to fill in so that we plan and also improve how we deliver these trainings, and also really understand what will be most pressing needs for the LDCs to help us plan for future activities. And for future, we are planning to have some will be in person and some will continue to be virtual activities, so that all LDCs have enough capacity to deliver the Enhanced Transparency Framework come 2024 or in the near future. As you are aware, during the past, under the convention, we used to report the BUR's national communications, and those were so lenient, unlike the ETF, which is very strong and has strict rules. And this will require more capacities, as the annual greenhouse gas inventories will be required, and they'll be more frequent in terms of reporting. So it's good that we become ready as LDCs, and that ready starts with having processes which will improve the data collection, analysis, and reporting for both greenhouse gas inventories and the other part of the NDCs, where we'll be now tracking the progress. So I wish you all the best, and really looking forward to continue the engagements, and you will be contacted for further events which will be organized by the LDC group. And once again, thank you so much, Sandro, Hector and Camila and all other people who supported this event, including the translators who were on the background providing the translation throughout the session. And thank you all, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.